November 1961, Liverpool Lime Street Station. Paul McCartney stood in the middle of platform 7, bass guitar slung over his shoulder. His jacket was thin, inadequate. It meant nothing against the cold November wind that swept through Liverpool that night. It was 11 p.m. The last train to London had just left, and Paul had missed it by 3 minutes. 3 minutes that felt like the end of everything. He stood there watching the red taillights disappear into the darkness, watching his future fade with them, watching the biggest opportunity of his life slip away because he'd been late, because the bus had been slow, because life had decided that tonight, of all nights, nothing would go right. Paul looked down at his watch. 11:03. The audition was tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. EMI Studios. Abbey Road. A producer named George Martin wanted to hear them play. The Beatles. John, Paul, George, Pete. 4 guys from Liverpool who thought they might actually have a chance. But that chance was in London, and Paul was in Liverpool. With no train, no ticket for the morning train, no money to buy one, just a bass guitar and a dream that was slipping through his fingers like smoke. The platform was nearly empty now. A few stragglers from the last train, an old woman with a suitcase, a businessman reading a newspaper, a young couple saying goodbye, holding each other like they might never let go. And Paul, alone, cold, scared. He sat down on a wooden bench, put his guitar case beside him, rested his head in his hands. What was he supposed to do now? Go home. Tell John he'd failed. Tell the band the audition was off because Paul McCartney couldn't even catch a train on time? He could hear John's voice already. Mocking, sharp, disappointed. Typical Paul. Always late. Always an excuse. George would just shake his head. Say nothing. That disappointed silence worse than any words. Pete would shrug. Well, that's it then. Back to the cavern. Back to playing for 50 people who don't care. Paul felt something tighten in his chest. This was supposed to be it. This was supposed to be the moment everything changed. But instead, he was sitting on a cold bench at 11 p.m. with nowhere to go and no way forward. Oi, you! Paul looked up. A police officer was walking toward him. Tall, maybe 40 years old, uniform crisp, baton at his side. Face hard, weathered, the kind of face that had seen too much and believed too little. He stopped in front of Paul. What are you doing here? The officer asked. Paul stood up quickly. I was trying to catch the train. I missed it. The officer looked at him. Really looked. At his worn jacket, his scuffed shoes, his guitar case, his messy hair. Missed it, did you? The officer's voice was flat, skeptical. Yes, sir. I was running late and... Where were you going? London. London, what for? Paul hesitated. How did you explain this to a police officer who looked at you like you were a criminal? I have an audition for a record company tomorrow morning. The officer didn't smile, didn't react, just stared. An audition, he repeated. Yes, sir. You're a musician. Yes, sir. The officer looked at the guitar case. What's in there? Paul's heart started beating faster. My bass guitar. Open it. Paul knelt down, unlatched the case, opened it. The bass guitar lay inside. Hofner violin bass. Paul's pride, his most valuable possession, worth more than everything else he owned combined. The officer looked at it, said nothing. It's just a guitar, Paul said quietly. I'm not doing anything wrong. I just missed my train. The officer didn't move. You got a ticket? No, sir. Money for a ticket? Paul swallowed. No, sir. So you're just sitting here on my platform with no ticket, no money, no place to go. I was just trying to figure out what to do. Figure out what to do. The officer's voice was cold. You know what it looks like when a young man with no money and no ticket sits around a train station at midnight? Paul looked up at him. I'm not a vagrant. I'm not homeless. You just what? You just thought you'd camp out here, sleep on my bench, play your little guitar for coins? No, I wasn't. Empty your pockets. Paul froze. What? Your pockets. Empty them. Now. Paul stood up, slowly, hands shaking. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out what was there: a crumpled receipt from a cafe, a guitar pick, a half-eaten pack of cigarettes, 73 pence in coins. That was it. That was everything Paul McCartney owned in that moment. The officer looked at the coins in Paul's palm, looked at his face. 73 pence, the officer said. And you were going to London? Yes, sir. To an audition? Yes, sir. For a record company? Yes, sir. The officer's expression didn't change. You're lying. Paul felt his stomach drop. I'm not lying, I swear. We have an appointment tomorrow, 9 a.m., EMI Studios, Abbey Road, a producer named George Martin. He wants to hear us play. Us. My band. The Beatles. We're from Liverpool. We play at the Cavern Club. We've been trying to get a record deal for months, and this is our first real chance, and Paul stopped, took a breath. I'm not lying. Please, I'm telling the truth. The officer stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, come with me. Paul's heart was racing now. Am I being arrested? Come with me, the officer repeated. Paul closed his guitar case, picked it up, followed the officer across the platform, through the station, past the ticket booths, the waiting room, the closed shops. They walked to a small office at the end of the main hall. The officer opened the door, gestured for Paul to enter. Paul stepped inside. The office was tiny: a desk, a chair, a filing cabinet, a single lamp, a window overlooking the tracks. Sit, the officer said. Paul sat. The officer closed the door, stood in front of it, arms crossed. What's your name? He asked. Paul McCartney. Age? 19. Address? Paul gave his address in Liverpool, Forthland Road, the house he shared with his father and brother. The officer wrote it down in a small notebook. Then he looked up. Tell me about this audition. Paul blinked. What? The audition? Tell me about it. Paul didn't understand what was happening. Was this an interrogation? A test? But he answered. There's a producer at EMI, George Martin. He heard about us from a man named Brian Epstein. Brian's our manager. He's been trying to get us a record deal. He sent George a demo tape. George listened. He liked it. So he called Brian and said he wanted to meet us. Hear us play in person tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. The officer listened, said nothing. Paul continued. This is the biggest chance we've ever had. We've been playing together for years. We played in Hamburg. We've played in Liverpool. We've played in basements and bars and tiny clubs where nobody cares. But this is real. This is EMI. This is Abbey Road. If George Martin likes us, if he signs us, everything changes. And if he doesn't, the officer asked. Paul looked down. Then we keep playing basements and bars, and maybe nothing ever changes. Silence. The officer walked to the window, looked out at the empty tracks. You really believe in this, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. You really think you're good enough? I don't know, Paul said honestly, but I want to find out. I want to try. I want to know if this is real or if I'm just dreaming. The officer turned around, looked at Paul. How old are you? 19. 19. The officer shook his head. When I was 19, I wanted to be a boxer. Thought I was going to fight in the ring, make a name for myself, travel the world. Paul waited. Didn't happen, the officer said. I wasn't good enough. Took a few fights, got my face smashed in, realized I didn't have what it took, so I joined the force, got a steady job, a pension, a life. He paused. But sometimes I think about it. What if I'd tried harder? What if I'd had one more chance, one more fight? Would it have mattered? Would I have made it? He looked at Paul. I'll never know, because I gave up. The officer walked to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a small tin box. He opened it, counted out some coins, some bills. Then he put them on the desk. £3, 17 shillings. Enough for a train ticket to London. Paul stared at the money, then at the officer. What is this? Paul asked. It's your ticket, the officer said. I don't understand. The first train to London leaves at 6:23 a.m. Gets to London at 9:47. You'll miss your 9 a.m. audition, but you can call them. Explain. Ask if they'll see you at 10. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But at least you'll be there. At least you'll try. Paul couldn't speak. The officer pushed the money toward him. Take it. I can't take your money. Yes, you can. But why? Why would you? Because I gave up, the officer said. And I don't want to watch another kid give up because he didn't have a train ticket. Paul looked at the money, at the officer, at the small office with its single lamp and its view of the empty tracks. I'll pay you back, Paul said. I swear, as soon as I can, I'll find you. I'll pay you back every penny. The officer shook his head. I don't want it back, but I want you to make that audition. I want you to play for that producer. And if he signs you, if you make a record, if this dream of yours comes true, the officer paused. Then you remember this night. You remember that someone helped you. And when you see another kid who's scared and broke and desperate, you help them too. Paul felt his throat tighten, his eyes burn. What's your name? Paul asked. Doesn't matter. It matters to me. The officer looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, William Harris. Paul nodded. Thank you, William. I won't forget this. I promise. Paul left the office, walked back through the station, sat on the same bench on platform 7. But everything was different now. He had a ticket. He had a chance. He had hope. He stayed there all night. Didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Just sat with his guitar and watched the darkness slowly fade to gray, then to pale morning light. At 6:15, other passengers started arriving. At 6:23, the train pulled into the station. Paul stood up, picked up his guitar, boarded the train, found a seat by the window, and as the train pulled away from Liverpool, he thought about William Harris, a police officer who gave up his dream, who gave a stranger £3 and 17 shillings, who believed in a 19-year-old kid with a bass guitar and 73 pence. The train arrived in London at 9:47 a.m. Paul ran through the station, through the streets, to a phone booth called EMI Studios, explained he'd missed his train, begged for a later time. The secretary sighed, put him on hold, came back. Mr. Martin can see you at 10:30, but don't be late again. Paul ran to Abbey Road, arrived at 10:15, out of breath, sweating, terrified. The band was already there. John, George, Pete. Where the hell were you? John demanded. I missed the train, Paul said, but I'm here now. They played for George Martin, played 3 songs. George listened, took notes, said nothing. At the end, he looked at them. You're rough, he said. You make mistakes. Your timing's off. Paul's heart sank. But, George continued, there's something here, something raw, something real. He paused. I'm going to give you a chance. 1 session. We'll record a single. See what happens. John looked at Paul. Paul looked at George. George Harrison smiled. Pete Best laughed. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. 3 months later, the Beatles released their first single, Love Me Do. It reached number 17 on the UK charts. Not number 1, not a smash hit, but it was a start, and a start was all they needed. Paul never forgot William Harris. Years later, in 1967, when the Beatles were the biggest band in the world, Paul went back to Liverpool, back to Lime Street Station, asked around, found out where William Harris worked, showed up one afternoon. William was standing on platform 7, watching passengers, same uniform, same weathered face. He didn't recognize Paul at first. Then his eyes widened. It's you, William said. Paul smiled. It's me. I heard about you, saw you on the telly, read about you in the papers. The Beatles, you made it. We made it, Paul said, and I owe you. He handed William an envelope. William opened it. Inside was a check for £10,000. William stared at it. I can't accept this. Yes, you can, Paul said. You gave me £3 and 17 shillings when I had nothing. You gave me hope. You gave me a chance. This is the least I can do. William's hands were shaking. This is too much. It's not enough, Paul said. But it's a start. William Harris retired 2 years later, bought a small house by the sea, spent his days fishing, reading, walking on the beach. He never told anyone about Paul McCartney, never sold the story to the papers, never asked for anything more. He just lived quietly, happily, and every time he heard a Beatles song on the radio, he smiled. Paul McCartney is 82 years old now. He's written hundreds of songs, played in front of millions, changed the world. But sometimes late at night, he thinks about November 1961, about a cold platform, about a police officer who gave up his dream so a kid could chase his, about 3 pounds and 17 shillings that changed everything. And he remembers what William told him. When you see another kid who's scared and broke and desperate, you help them too. Paul has helped thousands since then, donated millions, funded music programs, scholarships, charities, not for publicity, not for recognition, but because a police officer named William Harris taught him that kindness matters, that one person can change everything, that sometimes all someone needs is a chance. William Harris died in 1989, peaceful, quiet, surrounded by family. Paul sent flowers to the funeral, anonymous, no card, no message, just flowers. Because some debts can never be repaid, some kindness can never be matched. You can only pass it forward. Today, if you go to Liverpool Lime Street Station, there's a small plaque on platform 7. It says, "In memory of William Harris, police officer, 1922 to 1989, who believed in dreamers." Paul paid for it, installed it quietly. No ceremony, no press, just a plaque. For a man who gave a kid 3 pounds and 17 shillings and changed music history, because that's the truth about success. It's not just talent. It's not just hard work. It's kindness. It's chance. It's a stranger who believes in you when no one else does. Paul McCartney knows this. He lived it. On a cold November night in 1961, on Platform 7, when a police officer named William Harris decided that one kid's dream mattered, and everything changed.